everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kate Hamilton Health Podcast. So today's episode, I chat with Kayleigh Povey. Kayleigh is a certified gentle sleep coach and psychosocial expert with over a decade of clinical experience supporting families through some of life's most challenging transitions. With a background as head medical social worker in one of Ireland's leading children's hospitals, Kayleigh brings a rare depth of trauma-informed, compassionate care to her work. She currently supports parents and is expanding her work to include women navigating perimenopause and menopause, helping them transform their relationship with sleep through evidence-based, child-centred strategies that honour each family's unique needs. Trained by world-renowned sleep expert Kim West and with specialist education in attachment, trauma and infant mental health, Kayleigh is deeply committed to empowering exhausted families to reclaim restful nights and regulated days. Her work is rooted in understanding, working in partnership with women to create personalised sleep plans that restore not only rest, but energy, clarity, and a sense of self during times when these things can really feel hardest to find. We have the most amazing conversation. We talk about everything from sleep deprivation and what it feels like. We talk about optimizing newborn and mum sleep. We talk about guilt and judgment that we often feel as new parents. We talk about social media and its influence on those pressures and how we need to get back to actually listening to our instincts. We talk about menopause and perimenopause and the sleep issues that that stage of life brings. We talk about sleep habits, like all the do's and the don'ts around sleep for ourselves as we get older. And we talk about what we can do if we can't sleep. This is a fantastic conversation where I feel there is some value in it for absolutely everybody listening, whether you are a new parent, whether your kids are a bit older, whether you don't have kids. If sleep is important to you or if sleep is an issue for you, either or, there's some value in this conversation for you. So without further ado, here is the episode on sleep with Kayleigh Povey. Kayleigh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy to be here.
It's like a trip down memory lane for us, isn't it? For anyone listening who doesn't know me and Kayleigh, we're in secondary school together and our paths have crossed again now in a professional sense. And I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. We were good pals in school and then life happened and here we are again. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
And we're very sensible and adult-like compared to what we were like in school, I would imagine.
Yes, absolutely. Our lives are completely different. You're further ahead than me in the parenting world, and I'm still in the toddler era of my parenting life. So yeah.
And this is why I'm really excited to talk about all things sleep-related, sleep health, and how we can improve that in relation to, you know, being a parent of young children and then kind of talking about different stages of life as well, going in, talking a bit about menopause and sleep. Before we get into all of it, do you want to just tell everyone a little bit about you and your background as well and what kind of led you to where you are with this sleep education that you're giving us?
Yeah, so my name is Kayleigh Povey and I own sleepies.ie, which is a service dedicated to supporting parents with their little one's sleep. So my background is in medical social work. I've been a medical social worker for nearly 12 years, specialising in paediatrics. I'm the former head medical social worker in Temple Street Children's Hospital. And throughout my whole career, really, you know, sleep issues were always a challenge for parents because the nature of having a child who's unwell or chronically ill, you know, parents, when they're in the hospital, they're sleep deprived. So I've always been interested in this area and have been supporting parents around this. But it wasn't really until I had my first child who really struggled with sleep that I understood what it felt like to be chronically sleep deprived. So he slept well until the dreaded 4-month sleep regression. And then from 4 months to 10 months was, you know, wakes every couple of hours. I'd say the longest stretch of sleep I would have been kind of 3-4 hours if I was lucky. And I just felt, oh my God, I needed support. And I realized just how much of a struggle that is for parents. And in particular, I think when parents are working and, you know, thinking about going back to work. So I decided when I had my second child to take a career break and to study and learn more about this. I've always been interested in kind of furthering my knowledge and education, in particular around kind of supporting parents. So not only did it help me with my second child in that I knew exactly what to do and didn't live that chronic sleep deprivation. Obviously, there were sleepless nights at different times, but the chronic sleep deprivation, I was able to implement all of the different learnings. So he slept much better, which meant that I also slept much better. So my current, I guess, work is I'm on a career break from my pediatric social work job, which I love. And I'm focused on supporting parents through sleep ease. So through Instagram, through one-on-one work, I run masterclasses, I do voice note check-ins, and through talking to people like you to help parents who are listening today. So I guess throughout my work with parents, I've since become really interested in women's sleep, in particular as we are aging towards perimenopause and menopause. And I've learned so much about how hormones impact women's sleep and how our sleep can end up quite poor. And when we go through perimenopause and menopause, about 60% of women end up with sleep insomnia. So it's a real serious issue, and there are ways to help improve that. Within my own professional kind of journey, my paths are kind of changing slightly, but it all is still focused on supporting parents and in particular mums. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
That's fantastic. And it's such important work because I didn't realize that statistic. You're saying 60% of menopausal women are suffering with sleep insomnia.
Yes.
Wow.
And
That's
around
shocking.
30% of perimenopausal women suffer with sleep issues. Like me, myself, I had my babies later. I was 34 when I had my first, and then 36 when I had my second. And, perimenopause can start in the mid 30s. And what perimenopause is your estrogen levels start to reduce. And that has a big impact on our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health. So it's really important to educate ourselves and be aware of that. And sleep is impacted a lot.
Let's bring it right back then to you're talking about you understood how it felt to be so chronically sleep deprived after your first child. What does it actually feel like for anyone who maybe hasn't had kids yet? They're like, oh my God, just someone who might have been experiencing some of this and didn't realize, oh God, I really was in the depths of it. What does it feel like?
I think for me, it's, what I felt was that real just lack of energy, being able to enjoy your maternity leave like you want to, you're trying to get out and about. I always think that kind of 6 to 9 month time, I always say this to parents that I work with, is a really challenging time because you've got weaning, you're trying to make food, you're cleaning up after food, you've washing, you're in that routine. You've had 6 months of parenting, in particular if you're a new parent. So this whole shift and move into matrescence if you're a mum, where your brain has physically changed as you've become a parent. And, a mum described to me like she was sitting on a couch and her little baby was sitting on the floor playing, and she just was so chronically sleep deprived she just couldn't play with him. She was just sitting there. And that to me was such a kind of real obvious sign that she was in trouble, that she needed help and needed support. So chronic sleep deprivation, we know, impacts our mental health. It impacts our hormone health. It impacts our appetite, how we feel, our energy levels. And I think for me, it was just knowing that going to bed, you weren't going to get any sleep. So you start to feel quite negative about sleep, that kind of loss of hope that you're going to feel better and, be able to enjoy the day better.
It feels never ending, doesn't it? It's like that feeling. My sister has actually just recently had a baby there last week.
Well,
I love being an auntie. I love being an auntie. It's the best. That's her second child. But I love the newborn stage when it's not yours. And being an auntie is the best. The next best thing is you get all the newborn snuggles and then you get to hand him back and go
yeah,
home to your definite night's sleep.
yeah,
That's sorry, I'm making a joke about it, but it is that anxiety going to bed and not knowing how long you're going to
mm,
get. It does really feel like a dark hole that you feel like is never going to end. It's like a dark tunnel that you can't see the light at the end of, isn't it?
Yeah. And then for some parents, they'll go through the newborn phase and, around 8 weeks, then babies start to produce melatonin, which is a sleepy hormone, which is when you start to see those slightly longer stretches in the evening. You might get 4 hours, you might get 5, 6, and then it stretches. But for some babies, they are stuck in this cycle of waking very frequently. And therefore, those parents end up being sleep deprived in the beginning, but nothing is improving and they're going for months. And what I see quite commonly is that mums who are on maternity leave, they can manage it while they're on maternity leave because they're off and they'll go back to bed and they don't have to go to work during that time. But they seek help then when they are getting to that kind of maybe 9, 10 month stage, or maybe a little bit later, where they're kind of thinking, how am I going to go back to work and manage on such little sleep? So then they reach out for help when it's a crisis. For me, what I would love and my wish for parents is that, even antenatally would be part of the education and understanding, how babies sleep and how to help them improve sleep if you are in the trenches with your child's sleep. So, there's lots of different layers, and similar to health and well-being, it's one of the 3 pillars of good health. So you have nutrition, you've exercise, and you have sleep. But sleep is, more essential, and it's, only second to oxygen. The only thing more important that you need for survival is oxygen. So if you think of it like that, and how important it is for us, and that prioritizing it is really, really important. So I think, that newborn phase, we know we expect to be sleep deprived, and we know we have to feed our babies very regularly, every 2 or 3 hours. So you're going to be up and you kind of prepare for that. But when it goes on longer than that 3, 4, 5 months, then you need to seek help. That's what I would say to parents.
Is there a link between the chronic lack of sleep and postnatal depression?
Well, I think, when you're not sleeping well and your anxiety level is higher and you are not enjoying the days, you're moving into that danger territory, where your risk factors are much higher. So if you're not sleeping well, your risk factors for postpartum anxiety, depression, postpartum psychosis are all higher. So we really do need to prioritize sleep.
So let's get into these early stages. And someone listening has a small baby at home, they're in these early stages, or they know someone who has a small baby at home and might pass on this podcast too. What kind of things can we be putting in place from early on to optimize sleep for your baby and for yourself?
I guess lots of parents will say, well, how can I help my newborn sleep better? The most important thing and the key thing for your newborns, so babies who are 1, 2, 3, 4 months, the most important thing is regular feeds during the day. So you'll hear things like, not letting your baby go over kind of 3 to 4 hourly feeds, or feed on demand if you're breastfeeding. And what we want to focus on is that they're getting full kind of good feed. So if your baby's becoming distracted, go into a quieter room, ensure that they're getting that good feed very regularly throughout the day. And why this is important is it all links back to, similar to health, the 3 pillars of sleep. The 3 foundations of sleep, which are sleep pressure. So this is your innate drive to sleep. Sleep pressure is that feeling you get when you're exhausted. It's the tired feeling. And it's built up in your brain through a neurotransmitter called adenosine. So adenosine is that sleepy feeling, and that rises throughout awake time. And it's the same for adults, babies, and children. So for younger babies, we want to make sure there's a good balance between awake and sleep time. So that's why you'll read lots of advice around when naps should be and how long they should be. And the reason behind that is because they're trying to balance sleep pressure. So what helps to build sleep pressure is 1, being awake. 2 is muscle stimulation, so lots of movement. If you have a younger baby, tummy time, rolling. If you've a toddler or child, lots of active play. and then brain stimulation. So, sensory activities, jigsaws, whatever you like to do with your baby. If you're out and about walking, have the hood down, let them look at the world, let them be stimulated by the environment that you're in. And then the second foundation of sleep is your circadian rhythm. So, again, similar to adults. And this is what I see a lot of, that we need to try and kind of tweak the routine to support the circadian rhythm. And what helps to support your circadian rhythm as a baby and also an adult is, one, exposure to light, so sunlight. And some research would show us that 10 minutes of sunlight, so direct sunlight where it's hitting the back of your retina in the morning, can help babies and adults and children fall asleep easier and sleep longer overnight. So sunlight in the early morning, ideally before 9 a.m., 10 minutes outside, can work really, really well at helping to set the body clock. And equally in the evening time, then, as our bodies are producing melatonin, which is a sleepy hormone, darkness helps our bodies produce that. So it signals to the brain that it's time to wind down and go to sleep. If you are exposing yourself or your baby to lots of light, and if you think of how we live in a modern world, we live in a very bright world. Like 50 years ago, we wouldn't have had as many lights as we do in our home. So turning down the lights, darkening your home in the evening time can help with the production of melatonin, which will signal to your baby that it's time for sleep. And then the third pillar, or a third way to support your body clock, is with temperature. In order to sleep well, our room needs to be a certain temperature, so not too hot. And for babies, it's around kind of 18 to 20 degrees. For adults, it's around 16 to kind of 18 degrees. Your baby's core body temperature drops slightly in the last third of the night. So sometimes you'll see early rising or wakes at 4 or 5 a.m. And that can be because they feel cold. And also your home sometimes can be colder because naturally you've had the heating off and it's the coldest part of the night. So things like adding an extra pair of socks, an extra layer if you have a baby or a younger child, can actually work really, really well. So always dress your baby or your child for the coldest part of the night. That's just a little tip. And then the other pillar or foundation of sleep is your sleep hormone. So as I mentioned, melatonin is a sleepy hormone. Cortisol, if your sleep pressure, if you're awake too long, in order for your body to keep going and stay awake, you'll produce cortisol, which research shows impacts sleep. And as I mentioned, adenosine, and then serotonin, which is the happy hormone. So the three pillars of sleep, that's what we do in sleep coaching. We tweak routines, we do an assessment, we look for red flags. How can we change? How can we support sleep pressure? How can we support the circadian rhythm? And by also prioritizing the sleepy hormones that we need to help babies and children sleep better.
Yeah, there's so much to it that we don't think, like a lot of the stuff, people are like, oh yeah, look, I know it's supposed to be cool room, it's supposed to be dark. It's like, but it's like, we know these things, we can list them, but we don't actually take them seriously and realize how much of a difference when they're all pieced together it actually makes.
Yeah. And I always think of sleep, the more I've researched it and learned, and kind of the more courses I've done in it, it's similar to fat loss in that, you can buy the protein powder and have a protein shake, or you can have a low calorie meal, or you can go to the gym once, but it's not going to have any longer term effects. It's over time and building those kind of habits that will help improve sleep.
Patience and consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are both very hard to have when you're really tired.
They are. And, the number one indicator on how well your baby will sleep is their temperament. So if you have a baby who's particularly sensitive, there's other words such as alert, high needs, FOMO babies, Velcro babies, but a baby who wants to be in your arms, who loves co-sleeping, who wants to be beside you, loves contact naps, you most likely have a baby who has a sensitive temperament, and they need you to help them sleep, which can be, very hard for a parent because it's very intense, in particular those early couple of months. And then if it's going on, where you're sleep deprived. So with babies who do have a sensitive temperament, they need a particular way of helping them improve sleep, because if you try and rush in and do things too quickly, you end up with a lot of tears. And again, sensitive babies can go from 0 to 100 very quickly. They can cry for a long time. It can be really distressing for parents. But I think if you know and understand your baby's temperament, then you know how to work with them and not against them to improve sleep. So oftentimes parents will say, "Oh, my baby doesn't sleep well because I do contact naps, or I co-sleep, or I'm breastfeeding," but that's not why your baby isn't sleeping well. It's back to sleep pressure, circadian rhythm, their sleep hormones. So there are ways to support sensitive babies and improve sleep, and they can sleep very, very well. But when you're in the depths of it, it is tough.
That's so interesting you said about it's not really kind of what you're doing that's causing it. Like, as I would have thought that breastfeeding would definitely play a part in sleep patterns of a baby. And I would have thought how you interact with your baby in those situations would have an impact. Like, for example, me and my sister would be so different when it comes to our
Mm,
babies. Now, my babies are much older now. Like, I would have been a really old school. Like, I would have been so. Now, I
mm,
didn't breastfeed. And I was quite lucky with my first two babies anyway. They slept the night very quickly. We were on bottles. Like, by 6 weeks, they were both sleeping the night. Like, my third baby was a little bit harder, but I was very young when I had my first child. I was 23.
mm.
There was probably a lot of selfishness there. So me and my partner from day one, it was every second night. We shared the load. People at the time were like, "Oh my God, Kate, you're so selfish. Your husband has to go to work and you're like making him do half the night." So I was like, "Yeah, but I have to look after the baby during the day. I need to be able." And like, I was 23 and I did not. So like, before I had Jaden, I used to literally like lie until midday, kind of, that like early 20s age. So this was a huge like shock to the system for me.
Yeah.
So I think because we were so young and we were like just learning as we went, we did every second night, and that worked wonders. Also with my babies, I did let them cry. Is that a really bad thing to do?
Well, I think, every family is different. And for me, I've done a lot of training in attachment and trauma. And I think you have to meet the parent where they're at. And in terms of leaving your baby to cry, what I always advocate for is responsiveness and responding to your baby and helping them think about, why is your baby crying? What are they signaling for? And that, I guess, what our role is to respond to them. So for me, I think the importance is in the responding and being present for your baby. And with cry it out methods, like a long time ago, that was recommended as the go to for improving sleep. But we know now there's lots of other ways to improve sleep without having to leave them alone. And I think it's about knowing that and
Mm,
understanding that. And I think unless you have that information, how are you going to know there's another way? Some parents can't tolerate being in the same room as their baby crying. They find it too distressing. And that's because it's built within our DNA to respond to our babies. We're
yeah.
we're tuned as mothers to respond. So if you have a baby who's sensitive and goes from 0 to 100 and will cry intensely, now I'm meaning intensely for hours, it will be
That's very
impossible to
different.
leave your
Yeah.
baby
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
your baby crying. Or I always say to parents, well, what's the crying saying to you? And parents will usually know that different cries
Yeah,
mean
different
different
babies.
things.
Yeah, babies have different cries for different things, and that's it. I suppose my children never screamed all night. So, like,
Mm,
let's say my baby woke in the middle of the night crying, I'd be like, "Okay, we got to change a nappy, we got to do a feed," and then burp the baby or whatever, and then put the baby back down, and then the baby might cry for a few minutes, and
mm.
then they would go back to sleep, and then that just worked. But I suppose the difference is if you put your baby down and they start screaming bloody murder, then that's a different story altogether.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference with some methods of sleep coaching is that, a parent will be told stand outside for, a certain amount of minutes before going in. And for me, I don't use that method because for me, when I was in that situation and tried it, I found it too hard. My baby just cried more and louder. So it didn't work. So I had to find another way, and there is another way. And when you balance out sleep pressure and, circadian rhythm, you can get your baby to sleep with very minimal tears. Now, some babies will cry and will signal while you're in the room and you're trying to make these changes. And that can be sometimes really hard for parents to sit beside and comfort their baby while they're in the same room. But we know prolonged crying for babies is not good for their brain development and brain health. That babies have needs and they need to be met by their parents, so it's a balancing act. I never judge people for how they parent, because I've worked with parents from all walks of life, and who've ended up in very difficult situations through, working in the hospital, where you may have worked in child protection or bereavement, and people make decisions for different reasons, and they may be going through their own trauma and their own mental health issues. So sometimes improving sleep in the only way you know how, is the best way and the only way you have at that time. So I think it's really, education is key, and knowing, and like, I didn't know about this method of sleep training, and I was a social worker for, however many years at the time, until I met one of my old primary school friends in the dentist, because obviously your teeth fall out when you have a baby. And I was telling her what was going on, and she was like, okay, this is what you need to do. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this. Okay, thank you. And, back to your point about breastfeeding and sleep issues, again, I think that's a view that we all have or had. And certainly in my experience, I work with lots of formula feeding families whose babies have sleep issues. And I think the reason why we have this innate feeling and view of formula that actually it means less sleep issues is because traditionally, back in the 50s, 60s, formula companies were advertising this. So our parents' generation and their parents' generation moved to formula feeding because they were told by formula companies that it was better for babies and better for their health, and they'll sleep better and they'll be, healthier children. So it was kind of a marketing and advertising campaign that I think we're kind of dealing with the kind of remnants of that. But certainly, my first child, who's nearly 4, I combination fed him. So in the beginning, he was born, he jaundice, he needed fluids. And, I was very happy to do that. And it worked really, really well. And I had a lot of difficulties breastfeeding in the beginning. It was so painful. And I'd done all the prep work. I'd met a lactation consultant. I had my plan, but it felt completely different. And it was really hard. And I think if I hadn't had the bottles or the formula in the beginning, I probably would have stopped breastfeeding very quickly because it was too painful. But then on my second child, again, completely different experience. It's amazing how different babies can be, but certainly breastfeeding doesn't mean less sleep, and a formula doesn't mean more sleep.
I just wanted to interrupt the podcast for a moment to talk to you a little bit about Kate Hamilton Health online coaching. So we have 2 coaching options available. We have our elite coaching and we have our group coaching service. Our elite coaching service is bespoke, individualized coaching, which will help you to finally break free from diet culture with one-to-one anytime support from your coach and with access to a safe, supportive community. This is a higher ticket coaching option, and the coaching is by application only. If you go to my website, katehamiltonhealth.com, you will be able to apply for elite coaching through there, and we will be in touch to organize a call and to get you up and running. In relation to our group coaching starts on the first Monday of every month. When it's full each month, we do close the doors. With the group coaching is about building the habits, body and energy of the healthiest version of yourself and finally make it stick. We include personalized calories and portions, food lists, recipes, meal plan ideas, step goals, home or gym-based workouts, depending on what you want, changed every 8 weeks, mindset work, app access. So that's the Kate Hamilton Health app, which will be your hub for everything. Weekly yoga classes, WhatsApp group community, weekly group Q&A with myself, fun challenges, daily habits form, weekly self check-in, fortnightly check-ins with your coach, a library full of lifestyle guides, a library full of lessons, seminars, and all of this is updated regularly. We have weekly group Zoom calls with myself and the team, regular guest seminars where we get experts on to talk more to you about different topics that we need experts on for. And then we have in-person events twice a year that you will get at a major discount as being a member of the Kate Hamilton Health community. So, as I said, this starts the first Monday of every month. If you go to my website, katehamiltonhealth.com, you will see when the next group coaching intake is starting for you. So we close the doors as soon as that intake is full, or the Monday before the group coaching starts. So usually that last Monday of the previous month. So if you head over to katehamiltonhealth.com, all of that information that I've talked through is on the website. You'll be able to book your spot for the next intake there, and I will chat to you all then. I think what's a really important message from even just like everything we've talked about here around sleep, around feeding, around crying, around our methods of comforting our children, the number one thing that's got to go for every single mother or father listening is guilt. And it's amazing how hard we are on ourselves as parents, that even like listening to these things in my head, I'm like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have let my babies cry. But then I'm like, no, I didn't know any better back then when I did it. This is what I did because that's what I thought I needed to do. And and there'd be a lot of people listening being like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done, and I think if you're worrying about doing the wrong thing, or you're worrying about being a good parent, then you're a good parent.
I love that phrase because it's so true. I always feel you make the best decision you can at the time. And I think there's always going to be people out there. And I think we live in an age where we can consume so much information and opinions by so many people on the internet and, through opinions from family, from friends. If you think of how we parented, how people parented a long time ago, it was in your family setting, in your village, and that's where your knowledge came from. It didn't come from random strangers telling you to put your baby to sleep at 10:05 a.m. and give them a 2-hour 15 wake window, or put the information into an app and the app is going to calculate how long your baby should sleep. But the app doesn't take into account whether your baby is getting sick or going through developmental leap earlier or later than maybe the algorithms telling the app. So we've so much information. I feel that parents don't really trust their instincts. And that's a lot of the work that I do with parents. When I work with a family, my goal for them is that they become their own child's sleep expert. And the package that I have is 3 weeks. And the reason it's 3 weeks is because we generally improve sleep within the first week or two. And the third week, I'm handing over to them, and I'm there in the background as a cushion in case they need to come back to me. And there's always a big shift in how they feel within those couple of weeks. And the third week, I generally see parents will say, oh, I saw this and then I did this. Was that the right thing to do? And I'm like, absolutely, that was the right thing to do. But they've listened to their gut, they've listened to their instincts, and they've made the change. A lot of the work is around empowering parents to become their own child's expert, because no one knows your child better than you do.
That is such a good point. And like, I actually never even thought about like what it must be like for new mothers now. Like, I had my first child in 2010. So this is before Instagram. This is before, like you're seeing constant experts on the internet telling you what you should be doing, shouldn't be doing. You can see everyone else posting what they're doing. Like, there was none of that in 2010. But still, I remember the hardest thing about being a young mother was everyone giving you their unsolicited advice. Everyone giving you their opinion on how you should be doing things, shouldn't, even to the point where I was like, me and Dave, we shared the night feeds. Like, I got judgment for that. Whereas that was a decision between me and him. It wasn't me putting a gun to his head. But, it was, I remember feeling very much like I had to defend myself with every decision I made with my baby. And it's only coming back to me now as we were kind of talking about this. It's so long ago. He just walked into the house there as we we're recording. He's bigger than me now. He's 15. But when he was a tiny baby, and me and Dave were new to it, we hadn't a clue. And there wasn't that social media, which I think is great. In some ways, we have all this information available. I had like a baby book. My mother's fantastic, but she's not the most like maternal when it comes to babies. Like, I'd be like, what do I do here? And she's like, I don't know, my baby's 20. And I'm like, thanks, that was really helpful, mom. So it was kind of learning as we got, and she was so hands on with me, but she used to kind of, I'd be like, what do I do with it? If I said something kind of about something specific, she'd be like, I don't know, like, look it up in the book. But it was funny, like that I didn't really think about now how more difficult that side of things are, that pressure, that judgment, that
Mm.
even if it's not judgment, if you're sleep deprived and you're hormonal, it can feel like judgment, even if it's well meaning.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why, even talking about the crying, the breastfeeding, they're all really emotive topics, and I think sometimes you have to cut out the noise, cut out Instagram. If people are in your life giving you unsolicited advice, is not to, engage with that advice and find people who you feel are supported. And you'll know if they support you. You'll know deep down in your gut whether you find them helpful or not. Even I'm thinking back to when I was pregnant, I was coming up to 40 weeks and there was discussions around induction, and everything I read online was so negative about induction. Like so negative, to the point where I was like, oh God. But I was also like, I don't want to go 2 weeks over, because I have worked in a children's hospital and I've seen extreme things happen, which are so rare. But again, when you're living and working in that world, you're hyper aware of all the potential issues. So for me, I was like, I want to give birth in a hospital. I want, a team around me and access to medical care should I need it. They're probably like, God, this one. But all of the info around induction was so negative. And then one day I just said unfollow to anyone who was, telling me my body was going to end up torn to pieces and it was going to be horrendous. And I actually had a really positive experience. I had no tears. I recovered well, and my baby was born and he was healthy. And it was a very fine time, had an epidural and all of that was all well managed. So, and then I had a second induction and I, again, had a really positive experience. So I think as well, oftentimes what we consume can be very negative, and it's just to be mindful of that if it's not making you feel good, then don't consume the information.
Yeah, and our brains will always attract to the negative, and that it does that to protect us.
Yeah.
So it's an inbuilt mechanism in us that must protect, must keep you safe, take in this negative information. So like we tend to take in a lot more negative than we do positive. And like I think the unfollow is huge, and just surround yourself with people, your friends, your immediate family, whoever you feel is supportive, even if sometimes they do piss you off, which is going to happen. Like, and they're going to
Mm.
say things and give their advice, opinions, but at least, it's well meaning, it's come from experience. And then like follow the experts that you do find helpful, that you do find a little bit more, I suppose, productive, proactive, like so that it's actually serving you rather than frightening the shit out of you, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the huge positive about social media and Instagram is you have access to a community. And okay, you have to pay for it sometimes. But if you don't have that community within your family or your friends, you
Mm.
can find it online.
Yeah.
There's so many groups, there's so many people. And if someone you like who's based, no matter where they are in the world, if they resonate with you and you feel good when you're listening to them or talking to them, they can be part of your community, which is really helpful.
Because that baby stage can be quite lonely. I remember that being on maternity leave, and I used to go into my parents' house and like my sister be rushing around, my parents be rushing around, and people be coming and going, and I had nothing to do really. And I used to just go in for
Yeah.
something to do. And I remember feeling very kind of insignificant, like everyone else was busy, and all I was busy with was feeds and nappies. It can feel quite lonely, even if you are surrounded by people. So yeah, connecting with people that are going through something similar, which is great. That the likes of the coaching that you're doing as well is just so beneficial. I will obviously give all of your details when we're finished talking for any new mums out there who do want to reach out to you. But before we kind of go into kind of wrapping things up and where people can find you and what you kind of offer, let's talk a little bit about as we head towards perimenopause. I spent a decade having kids. Like I had my first child at 23, my next child at 26. And then I had my last child at 31, which is, by the way, hell of a difference, like physically to recover at 31 than it was at 23. So I spent from like 23 to 31 having kids. And then obviously my early 30s with quite small children. I'm 39 now. So I feel like I've got that little bit, my mid to late 30s has been a nice little gap where, you know, my kids are a little bit older. I get a little bit of a breather. I feel good. I've been able to focus on me. It's been
Mm.
amazing. I work with a lot of women who are going through perimenopause. I know what's coming. We were talking about this personally as well, that you start having your children in your 30s, and by the time they're getting bigger, you're probably going to be heading straight into perimenopause. And for a lot of women listening, it'll be mixed. Some people will be like me, they kind of had kids young or spread them out and they've been raising kids for a decade. And there's other people who've waited to their mid to late 30s, sometimes even into their 40s, to have their child or their children. And then they're only just recovering from that sleep deprivation. And then suddenly, bam, perimenopause hits. So, you know, it's
Mm.
so fun being a woman, really, isn't it?
I know. And the more I have learned and researched this, the more I'm like, God, maybe I should have had kids at like 19. That's like the optimal. And then you can spend your 30s without being sleep deprived. But society and our modern world doesn't really allow for that anymore because, you know, it's so challenging trying to buy a house and, you know, you're in
Absolutely.
college and all of that. But, you know, the reality is from around 35, if you enter perimenopause early, or around 40, if it's a bit later, you know, you spend 10 years where your estrogen levels are starting to decline. We know that does impact not just sleep, but your physical health, your mental health. And the more I research it and the more training I've done in this area, I've just become so fascinated by it because, you know, years ago, women would have just been put on antidepressants and anti anxiety medication and told, you know, well, you're going through the change and that's it. And then when the study came out on HRT, which now we know it has some flaws in it, the study was done on women in their 60s. Women were taken off HRT, off hormone replacement therapy. So we know that as you enter perimenopause and menopause, your sleep quality declines. And insomnia, as you mentioned earlier, can become a real significant issue. So it's one of the symptoms of perimenopause. And again, that can impact your physical health and your mental health.
And the cause of this, I presume, as you said, is that drop in estrogen.
Estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. So all our hormones are changing and reducing in our system. So when you go to the doctor, you know, they can do tests to test your estrogen levels. They can do tests to test your progesterone levels. However, at different times of the month, that could be surging. So it's not always a good indicator of whether you are in perimenopause or not. So the best way to know is to keep your symptom diary. So to note down what you're feeling, how you're feeling, so you can go to your doctor with a much better history on what exactly is going on. Basically, medication that you can be treated with when you're going through perimenopause or menopause are HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, which is estrogen and progesterone, which is going to be free from, I think, the 1st of June. They've finally announced SSRIs, which are antidepressants, or hypnotics, which again are sleeping aids, but they can cause other problems. So non kind of medicine treatments would be things like looking at food, at supplements, looking at your sleep habits. And then if sleep kind of continues to be an issue, looking at cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which has really, really good results in helping improve sleep.
That's so interesting because obviously my work is very much based around lifestyle. And a lot of what people do, like, you know, people come to me and they'll be like, I want to lose weight. I'm in perimenopause and, you know, it's an absolute nightmare. I can't lose weight. My body doesn't feel like it's mine anymore. And, you know, there's so many issues going on. Can
Yeah.
I even lose weight? And I think then some people think, you know, like I need a menopause specific diet. And it's like, it can be really annoying, especially if you feel like shit. It is literally the foundations. Like there's not any different rules as you go through perimenopause and menopause than there is before or after. It's still
Yeah.
the same rules apply of the foundations of living a healthy lifestyle, except it gets a shitload harder because it does. So it is, again, it comes back to consistency. It comes back to patience. And what I'll always say, if your symptoms are extreme, and you put into place all of those foundational lifestyle factors that I do within my coaching, it is worth a visit to the doctor because sometimes it can just be a lot worse than just lifestyle. But in general, when we're talking about general, how can I improve my health and how can I lose weight when I'm going through perimenopause, it is, like our number one is always sleep. It is optimizing the amount of sleep that you are getting, even if it's a little bit out of your control, like, putting a healthy sleep routine in place, then whole foods, a high protein diet, a high fiber diet, because quite often when people start increasing protein, they don't increase fiber. It causes digestive issues. So fiber being hugely important, plenty of water, daily movement, resistance training. So these things are like, when we actually start to put these things in place for a lot of women, it does make a huge difference, because we lead such busy lifestyles, such stressful lifestyles, that when we start addressing these issues one at a time, it can make a huge difference. We start lifting weights, we start actually prioritizing that daily walk. You're getting that light that you're talking about as well every day, because you're out walking, reducing alcohol. Like, that can always be, I always feel like I'm such a party pooper, but it's so true. Like, it's just a no-brainer one. Like, reducing alcohol right down, because it just wreaks havoc in the body, particularly when there's already havoc with your hormones going on inside. But a lot of the habits that I am getting to a point, by the way, a lot of the habits that that we work through within my coaching program, in relation to nutrition, increasing protein, increasing food quality, fiber, all of those things, the exercise that we put in place, forming all those habits, most of them over time are really doable for everyone. The hardest one to tackle is sleep.
The reason it's hard is because as your estrogen levels reduce, your sleep quality reduces. So just touching on what you're saying about, doing resistance training and why that's really important is because our progesterone levels start reducing. And progesterone is responsible for keeping our muscles tight. So our muscles can become slightly fibrous. And in terms of your sleep, you might have heard of a condition called obstructive sleep apnea, and women who are moving into the menopause and post-menopause phase, if their progesterone levels start reducing, their muscles are more fibrous. The muscles in the throat can cause an issue because when you're sleeping, your airway becomes floppy. So you're not taking in as much oxygen as you need. And that can result in obstructive sleep apnea. So again, throughout the night, your quality of sleep is reduced and you're having lots of little wakes throughout the night. And then in the morning, you wake up and you don't feel good. You don't feel refreshed. What you're saying about alcohol is really true, unfortunately. And, the narrative around alcohol can be, oh, I had a glass of wine to help me relax in the evening and it helps me sleep better. But unfortunately, alcohol is your sleep's frenemy. Yes, it can help you feel relaxed, just as yoga can help you feel relaxed, or acupuncture, or, a warm bath. But if you are having even a glass of wine before bed, what happens with your sleep is that your sleep becomes fragmented. So you have, again, lots of little micro wakes. You don't realize you're waking up, but you're not getting into those deep phases of sleep and REM sleep, which we need to help clear the adenosine in our brain. And it's really helpful for many, many other things. So alcohol is not your friend when it comes to sleep.
I swear I didn't tell her to say this, by the way, everyone. I was actually only just recording a podcast yesterday about this. But all you need to do is, like, if you wear one of these fitness watches and you know what your resting heart rate is, have 2 glasses of wine and then go to bed and then check your resting heart rate the following morning when you wake up, and wait till you see how much higher your heart rate is just from having 2 glasses of wine, the difference that's going to make. Your heart rate increases. My heart rate increases like sometimes like up to like 10 beats. Like, it could raise from like 58 to like 68. Now, I'm really sensitive to alcohol. It doesn't agree with me. But like my resting heart rate would massively increase. And it just shows that your sleep is going to be so shit as well, because your body is trying to metabolize that alcohol. So it's busy. Your body's busy doing that. It's like having a heavy meal before sleep not being a great option most of the time as well, because it means your body can't actually restore and rest. Really.
The other things that I guess go against falling asleep is even exercising too close to bedtime. So ideally no exercise within 2 hours of bedtime, because that raises your core body temperature, and that's key for helping us fall asleep and to maintain our sleep during the night. So like me, I find that if you're not sleeping well during the night and they're up early, or you've planned to go to the gym or do a workout and never happens, and then I'm like, okay, I'll work out at 8 o'clock or 8:30 at night. But if that's too close to bedtime for you, so if your natural bedtime is maybe 10, you will have more difficulty falling asleep and maintaining sleep as well. The other inhibitor of sleep is caffeine. And what's interesting about caffeine is we know now there's lots of positive health benefits with antioxidants that are within the coffee bean. But in terms of your sleep, if you think back to when we talked about sleep pressure, so sleep pressure rises, and what happens with caffeine is it turns off the receptors that your body feels when that sleep pressure is rising. So you don't feel sleepy. However, what is happening is your sleep pressure continues to rise. It's diluted with the caffeine. And then all of a sudden, when the caffeine wears off, you get that crash where you're exhausted. For new parents who are maybe trying to keep going when their baby is napping, or even, women who are a little bit older, or who have older children, if you are feeling exhausted, having a 20-minute nap. So have your coffee, then have your 20-minute nap. The nap will reduce the sleep pressure. And then when you wake up after 20 minutes, again, you won't feel as tired, but your sleep pressure will already have reduced as well. So that's a little hack, if you will.
Yeah. So we're all for the naps. That's what we're saying. Naps are
So
great.
20 minutes. So what we want to do is remain in that light phase of sleep. We don't want to get into a deep phase of sleep, because then you will experience sleep inertia, which is that feeling when you wake up and you're just so tired, you're groggy. It takes you a while to come around. You need food, you need something to kind of pick you up. So that's because you've woken up in a deep phase of sleep. For some babies and children, if you wake them from a nap, which you will most likely have been advised to do, but if they're in that deep phase of sleep and they wake up and they're crying and really upset, that's because of sleep inertia. So it's that deep phase of sleep that they're suddenly woken out of. So for adults, 20 minutes, and cap it at 20 minutes, and you'll have just reduced your sleep pressure enough that you'll feel much better. Whereas if you're waking yourself in a deep phase of sleep, you'll feel really groggy and horrible when you wake up.
That's literally why I don't nap, because I feel like I'm just teasing myself and then I have to drag myself up all over again. That's so interesting. 20 minutes. My husband is the absolute king at this. Like, he just falls asleep anywhere for about 20 minutes and then he just wakes up refreshed. It's gas. It just happens naturally to him. He's like a baby. Like, we'd be in the car, we mightn't be out of Kilcool and he'll be asleep. If I'm driving, obviously, if I'm driving. But yeah, that's so interesting. So you're saying definitely do the naps, be aware of caffeine, alcohol, late exercise. Is there anything else we should be putting in place? Not talking baby related, if we're talking more kind of, sleep is getting a little bit disrupted as we're getting older. What else?
Yeah, things like, I hate the word sleep hygiene. I just feel like the word hygiene, the opposite of is dirty. So I
Like
just I
dirty
don't
sleep.
like that phrase.
Yeah.
Similar to when you're focusing on fat loss, when you're focusing on improving your sleep, it's habits over time, it's consistency, and it's really trying to help your body relearn how to sleep. So you're challenging those beliefs that, having a alcoholic drink is going to help you sleep. You're challenging those beliefs. And then what you're focusing on is where you sleep, that, your room is optimized for sleep. And again, you're not going to like this, but phones and lights, TV, anything that is going to inhibit the production of melatonin or stop the production of melatonin or stimulate you in the evening will impact your sleep. So we need to be mindful of that. If you're having difficulty sleeping, then that's something that you might need to change or adapt. So ensuring on your phone that you have the blue light reduction, you can do that where you change it.
Yeah,
to
it
night
goes
mode.
grey after a
Yeah,
certain time.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you're doing that even if you have to be on your phone or you really want to be on your phone, that you're trying to optimize it for your sleep, that your room where you sleep is as cool as it can be. So open the windows, cool down your bedroom. When you get into bed, like, you can wear socks, you can have your hot water bottle, that's fine. But the room environment where you sleep should be around kind of 18 degrees or cooler if you can. Your bedding should be cotton, that it's light. Other things, like in terms of habits and reducing the light, if you dim down the lights in your home. So if you, like, even in my house, I've got the overhead lights, the side lights, the kitchen lights, there's light everywhere. Start turning off the lights. So you have the lights off if you're not in the kitchen. If you're in the sitting room, it's only a little lamp that's on. There's no light in the hall.
So
Then you go
similar habits for us as it would be for the babies. We want to, yeah,
exactly,
treat
yeah.
ourselves like giant babies.
So almost it's part of cognitive behavior therapy where you're retraining your brain. And even by doing that ritual of turning off the lights, you're preparing your body for sleep, because okay, in an hour I'm going to go to bed. I'm winding things down now. And then when you get into bed, like, lots of people will watch TV or want to watch a show as they fall asleep. They like hearing something as they're falling asleep. And that's linked back to our childhood, where we were read stories to as children, and it's really comforting falling asleep. So there are adult storybooks that you can listen to on podcasts or on the Calm app or on YouTube, where these stories are really detailed narratives
Yeah,
which
it's
help
sleep
you
stories.
fall asleep. Sleep stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good way to help you fall asleep as well. If you wake up and you're having difficulty either falling asleep, or you wake up and you can't get back to sleep, in your mind, go on your daily walk. Wherever you're walking, go on your walk or walk around your house and take notice of everything that you're seeing. So you're walking down the path with your dog, you notice the grass moving, you see the tree far away, you can see the sea. Notice all the things on your walk that will help you fall asleep, that will help you get back to sleep if you wake up. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're awake for more than half an hour, get up out of bed. So what we want is that our body's not used to staying in bed when we're awake, because then we start to become anxious and stressed around sleep and not getting back to sleep. And then my last little hack is not to check the time. So if you check the time, your body is going to start thinking about the time. Again, it's going to wake it up, and you're going to start worrying that it's 3 a.m. I only have 5 hours or 4 hours till I have to be up. It's going to be harder for you to get back to sleep. So if you wake up and you can't get back to sleep, get up, go into a different room, go downstairs. Try not to eat, because again, eating gives us energy and that will set your circadian rhythm. So try not to eat, whether you do some kind of stretching, something that's relaxing, listen to a podcast, listen to a sleep story, and then go back to bed when you feel sleepy. Don't lay in bed for hours awake.
Like, the stressing about not being able to sleep is not going to help. That makes so
Yeah.
much sense. Kayleigh, thank you so much. There's been so much value in this. I think for everyone, for young mothers, for those of us who are a little further on in our parenting stage, and, for older people as well. Like, there's so much, like, anyone at all who has any issues around sleep, or, doesn't yet, but wants to make sure that they're doing everything they can to optimize the sleep they are having. Like, this has been so helpful. Where is the best place for people to reach out to you? What kind of programs do you offer at the minute? And yeah, if you just want to just tell everyone a little
A
bit
little
about.
bit about Sleepies. So I'm
Yeah.
on Instagram, sleepies.ie. I'm getting better at posting and being actively on Instagram. So I generally have my up-to-date kind of offerings there. I have monthly masterclasses online. Then you will be able to access kind of recordings of different workshops. So they're going to be up as well. So the different package options I have, I work with people one-on-one through sleep packages where you have access to me individually for 3 weeks to improve sleep. Then I do one-off consultations as well. At the moment, I have a WhatsApp voice note check-in called Send Me Sleep, where you can send me your kind of sleep dilemma and I'll get back to you with advice on what to do. And I guess the reason I introduced that was because I found that so many parents were like that. You're on your boogie walk, you're not sure what to do, you want to talk to a person rather than listen to something or read something. And you can kind of tell the different nuances when I hear that from someone. So a voice note check-in service. And then I'm going to be launching my community support service, which is called the Sleep Pod. where we'll have a WhatsApp group with lots of individual support and group support from other parents, and you'll get access to all the different masterclasses, and we'll have a live Q&A every week where we'll go through your sleep issue and I'll give you advice in that setting. So that's going to be launching soon as well. So I'm on Instagram, sleepies.ie, and my website is also sleepies.ie.
That's amazing. So reach out to Kayleigh if you have any questions. She would be happy to answer. And Kayleigh, thanks so much for coming on and chatting to us about all things sleep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kate.
I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And I would just ask for one thing from you. If at all possible, could you make sure that you subscribe to the podcast? It really does make such a difference. If there's a particular episode that you've enjoyed, please do share it in your WhatsApp groups, share it on your stories, tag myself and the guest in your stories. All of these things really do help to grow the podcast. And obviously, if there's anything you'd like to reflect on, please do leave a comment. It would mean the world to me, and I will see you on the next one.